Hey, folks, welcome back. And we're going to return to a topic we've talked about in the past. It's called FinOps. It's the idea that we're going to take our finance people and our IT people, put them together, and manage our cloud costs better. There's an article up on DevOps.com talking about there's a greater need for urgency from a consulting firm called Do It, that is the author. And by the way, we do take contributions to our websites. And if you're watching this, we'll consider making a contribution from the content side. We'll make you famous. But Tracy, the author is making a case that says that there's just simply not enough urgency out at the DevOps engineers' point of view, because everybody's kind of focused on just making the thing run, and the cost of it is maybe secondary. And my question to you is, A, do you agree? And B, if so, what's to be done about it?
So, DevOps teams have been pushed for years now, pretty much in two areas, not even innovation, agility and velocity. How do you push things out to end users, get new features out to end users as fast as possible? Which is important because that's what drives business. That's what keeps us competitive. It's what we do, right? That's what DevOps do. DevOps engineers make it possible for us to make quick changes to software. Now, when we think about FinOps being part of DevOps or having these two organizations talk more, which they do, by the way, we're now talking about more accountability. And sometimes it's hard to be completely accountable when you're trying to move fast and agile. So we're shifting now, if this is the case. And I do believe that we should be adding more to the DevOps process. We should be thinking more about security. And this is another part of the FinOps discussion. What is operational impact? What is a change going to do? Is there some regulatory issues that we should be exploring? And what does it cost? This is something we've really never thought about in DevOps. It's true, because we have been pushed by upper management to get fixes out fast, not to be accountable for the cost of it or even regulatory compliance. In many ways, we talked so many years and years and years, we had this discussion about separation of duties, and we tried to work on that. Now we have generating SBOMs. Sometimes we get that done. Sometimes we don't. Most workflows don't even have that. So adding cost is going to be an issue for us. And mainly because DevOps pipelines, as I have talked about many, many times on this show, need to evolve. It's hard to update DevOps pipelines right now when they're so scripted and there's thousands and thousands of them. So we have to do this in a different way in order for us to be more accountable. We're not Ortelius and Deploy Hub is probably the only evidence gathering store so that you can start doing historical trends and look at potentially add cost analysis in there. So we don't have the tools to actually incorporate FinOps and accountability into existing DevOps pipelines. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that I kind of doubt if the C-suite's going to say, yeah, put a bunch of money into that, because ops can start managing costs. I don't know if DevOps needs to.
Theoretically. So, Jack, whose responsibility is it to manage the cost? Is it going to be, to Tracy's point, the centralized IT team led by maybe a CIO, or is it going to be the software engineers? And I don't know. I mean, you've been at this for a while, but is there a change in the tenor of the conversation about cost in IT these days?
There's always a conversation about cost in IT. The bigger problem, in my view, is that it's really hard to retrain people once they're used to doing something a certain way to do it differently, right? And so if you're going to get DevOps folks, IT folks that have been concentrating on getting things done as quickly as we can because we have to support the organization and who cares about the cost, to start thinking about, well, if I do X versus Y, I'm going to spend an extra $1 million. It's going to be a real problem to get those folks to think that way. And I think management has a role and a responsibility on that side, but retraining is going to be the key issue going forward. And frankly, the folks that we train, you go to school to learn software engineering, they don't teach you about the costs involved. They teach you about, here's the best way to code, here's the most efficient use of the CPU, which, by the way, they all have cost issues with them, but it's not really about how do I do this the cheapest, fastest way. Compute cycles for most companies are kind of invisible. They cost something, right? But they're invisible. There's so many of them. We don't have to be efficient at what we do with them. And I think that's the real situation here is how do we evolve the thinking in the DevOps space to also consider if I do it this way, what's the cost to the company?
So, Mike, there's an old adage. You keep banging your head against the wall. Either the wall goes soft or your head goes soft. And that's pretty much what we're up against here, right? Let's take it from a people perspective. And Stacey, I'd be interested in your take. And I don't mean to just pick on DevOps. This isn't a DevOps issue. This is an ops issue. This is an IT issue. People are under such pressure. Get it done now, make it fast, make it work. We're going to replace you with AI, right? You got to make this happen. They're not necessarily rewarded for making it happen the cheapest. They're rewarded for making it happen the fastest. And so if you want to now kind of change that equation and say it's okay not to be so fast because I want you to be cheap, they look at that as, oh my God, the bean counters are in charge again, right? We go through that a little bit ourselves here. I had someone write me, "Are you still using your password manager? We could shut that down and save money." You know what? F you. I need my password manager. I'm not going with that. When your quest for saving $1 starts cutting into productivity, you got problems. Now, I'm not saying there's not waste, but almost since the very first day that the cloud was the cloud, someone spun up an instance and didn't shut it down when they were done. And nothing has changed since then. I've got one answer for you here. I feel like I'm talking to Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate. Got one word for you: automation. We need to automate FinOps so that it's not necessarily the poor schnook DevOps engineer or the ops person who's responsible for counting the beans. We need to automate that so it gets done in there and take it off these people's already crowded, overburdened plates.
There's even a bigger piece, I think. Sorry for interrupting, Al. I just want to expand that. I don't disagree with you. But if you're going to automate the process, you need to automate the entire cost process. It's not just DevOps, it's all of IT, but it's also the end user environment, right? You need to follow the dollars all the way through.
When I think of concepts, you're giving these developers what feels to me like a ball and chain and saying, here, run with this and be as fast as possible and as agile as possible. And it's like, if you're carrying a bunch of weight and you're not as able to be that nimble, it's going to slow you down. It's going to run into that ability. And they're also not necessarily exercising that muscle of thinking that way. And so when you say automation, people, it's good to train them to have that idea, whether it's a notification of here's your budget and you're exceeding it, and what does that look like? But again, it always comes down to that pain point and what's prohibiting you from moving forward in the way that they're designed to do their job. And are you holding them back into what's the advantage of that? What are you really paying for at the end of the day? And does the cost outweigh the benefit? Not always.
I'm not entirely sure I agree with the premise that I have to have a trade-off between fast and inexpensive, or at least some modicum of cost control. But these things are not mutually exclusive in my mind. But Tracy?
Well, the thing about it is that we're already managing costs. We don't just not look at costs. IBM a couple of years ago bought KubeCost, right? To track the cost of containers and their Kubernetes configurations. But that data is not connected to the DevOps pipeline. So, and most of these DevOps CI/CD tools, they're job schedulers. They're just job schedulers, and they have a log that goes with it. They don't have the ability to track data. They don't version data. They don't even give you historical references other than where a log might be and if a build was successful. That's what these tools are doing. So we will fix this. I believe that MCP servers are coming faster than we all imagine, and I do believe that DevOps and CI/CD as we know it will be replaced with MCP servers, so that right now, today, if somebody is using KubeCost from IBM, they could connect it into their DevOps pipeline. So for every time a container gets pushed out, that version of that container, the cost of it is being associated right to the DevOps pipeline. It will happen, but we can't do it right now with our technology. And it's not that we don't want to. It's just not possible. It literally is almost impossible to manually update all of these scripts. It cannot be done anymore. Plugins are a huge, huge problem in the DevOps world. And to try to build a plugin for every time you want to manage something or add more accountability, like an SBOM, or trying to track the cost of a container in its test or production environments, it's not possible to do. So it's not that we don't want to, it's that we don't have good tooling right now to allow us to be that agile ourselves. We've been supporting agile development, but we are not agile DevOps engineers. Our DevOps pipelines are not agile. So I want to see this happen. And I do believe that it will be, plugins will be replaced with MCP servers, and we'll have context windows that will connect the pipelines, and we'll have workflows that AI is managing. And then we can say, I'm going to add KubeCost to my pipeline, and it's not going to impact my pipeline. I'm not going to take a chance of breaking my pipeline by adding this one particular connection.
I think we may be too much in the dirt here with this discussion. So what I mean by that is, look, I don't disagree with anything you just said, Tracy, but at the end of the day, if I add a component, whether it's a cloud component, a local component, a bunch of code, what I really want to know from a FinOps view is, how does that affect my entire business? It's not just IT anymore, right? If I add a component, does that increase my sales? Does that reduce my sales? Does it make my people more productive? Does it make them less productive? I'm not talking just about the dev folks, the DevOps folks, because certainly that's important, and managing that cost is important. But you really want to look at it from a more holistic viewpoint, and just tracing, the Kubernetes components isn't enough. It's how does that overall affect my business? That's a really hard problem to solve, but that's where the real benefit would come to most organizations.
In the meantime, we're going to get a bunch of AI agents that are wagging their fingers at us every time we overspend, right?
Right. Or just turn off your machine. The agent just come in and say, sorry, the quarter you put in the slot, that time is over. You can't use it anymore.
Something to be said there. All right. Hey, let's take a break on this one, guys. I think we've kind of covered it all. We'll take a break here on the gang. We'll come back and let's go to our C blocks. You're watching TechStrong, gang.